Hey everybody, thank you so much for tuning in. Today I wanted to give you a very quick review of a book called Unshakable, and this is by Tony Robbins. If you're looking to take your financial freedom to the next level, then this offers a really practical guide. The one book that I might recommend slightly above this one is Tony's book just prior to this, which is called Money Master the Game, but he came back with Unshakable because Money Master the Game was, I think, like 800 pages long, and he realized that not everybody was going to read a book that's large. So this is much more manageable. Let's see, a little over 200 pages, really easy to digest. And the reason why I wanted to talk about these two books is you've got to get your financial house in order. If this is not an area that you've been paying attention to and that you may have been neglecting, now's an opportunity for you to really digest the essential principles and insights that you really need to master that area. And trust me, you need to master it. It's not as hard as it may seem. The one thing I want to mention, which Tony elaborates on in the book, is that the financial industry benefits from this myth that mastering your finances is more difficult than it actually is, because it makes you want to give other people your money and let them manage it for you. But there's a very dangerous problem with that that's elaborated upon in these two texts. And the problem is that when you give your money to, a mutual fund or a broker or any sort of actively managed institution where they're picking stocks with your money, then typically what is happening is a great deal of your actual investment returns are being eaten up by fees. And so what will happen is, again, this is elaborated upon much more in the text, but anywhere from 1% to 3% typically is the average, is being eaten away at fees. And that doesn't seem like much. That seems reasonable, right? But the problem is when you factor in the power of compounded interest, which means that the money you invest generates small amounts of returns and then eventually skyrockets. What ends up happening is if you take 1% to 3% off of your gains each year, you actually end up getting a graph that looks like this, which means that your total nest egg over time gets cut in half, like in half. So you don't want that. You do not want that. But the good thing too to understand is that trying to invest your money in ways to beat the market, that is to say, the whole idea of, I'm going to invest here because I think it's going to do really well and then I can sell it. You don't want to be playing that game. It's not a game that's going to make you money over the long term. It's a game many people have tried for literally centuries, and the data shows that it just does not work. In fact, this is the advice of the best investor probably in the entire history of mankind, Warren Buffett, and he says that what you want to do is to not try to beat the market. That's a fool's errand. But he says that what you really want to do is you want to have your investments in such a way where you are essentially riding the market wave over the long term. And over the long term, the market increases big time. So let me give you a concrete example. Rather than putting your money in like Google or Apple or Facebook stock, which could eventually dip. We also happen to MySpace, right? Instead, what you'd want to do is you want to invest your funds in what's called an index fund. So an index fund, the most popular one, the one that I invest in heavily, is the S&P 500 index. And so this is a collection of 500 companies, and essentially, when you buy into that, you're diversifying your investments across all 500 of those companies. Now, the benefit is if one of the companies does so poorly it no longer qualifies to be on the index, it's replaced with one that's doing better. So that's why that is incredibly valuable, is instead of betting on one horse, you're essentially buying stock in the strength of American capitalism, which again, over the long term, wins out. Well, you might be thinking, okay, but wait a minute, what about 2008? What about the Great Depression? What about these big dips? Well, the one thing you need to understand is that on average, every 10 years, there is a significant market correction. And this is nothing to be worried about. This happens very normally, very naturally. Every time there's some recession, everyone thinks that the entire world is coming to a halt when It absolutely is not true. It's entirely temporary. And when you look at the graph of, again, American market, it goes up over the long term. So that's where you want to be investing in, is in the long term. You don't want to be trying to short the market. We're trying to get you on a path to financial freedom. Or at the very minimum, we want to make sure that we're putting your money to work for you so that you're making money while you sleep and that you can release this burden that you have in your mind of, covering your financial responsibilities. So that gives you a bit of the overview. So now you're probably thinking, okay, well, what's the process? How do I actually do it? Well, if you want to be walked through this entire process in detail, I recommend you message me and I'd be happy to set up a phone call with you. This is a shortened version of the process I walk my clients through. But the first thing I want you to understand, which this book will lay out for you as well, is that you can get on a path to financial freedom. If you are making pretty much any amount of money in the American economy today, if you take the right actions and if you get started right now, then you can become financially free in your lifetime. It will happen. May take more time for some than for others, but if you start doing the right things, it is possible. So the first thing you need to understand is you've got to start investing now, and not tomorrow, not next month, not a year from now, now. Let me share with you why this is the case. There's a hypothetical example that's illustrated in Unshakable that I'd like to share with you. And the exact numbers are not going to be identical, but the principles are the same. So let's take two examples. Okay, you've got John over here and you got Joe over here. John starts investing at age 25 and he stops investing at age 35. He invests $3,500 a year for 10 years and then stops investing. Okay? Joe, on the other hand, does not start investing until he's 35. And then he invests $3,500 the first year and increases his amount steadily year after year after year. And then he doesn't stop until he's 60 years old. So he's actually investing for 25 years and he's increasing the amount every single year. Versus John, who invested the same static amount for 10 years and then stopped. But he did it early on. Who has more money at the end of it? It's actually John. And this is incredibly surprising to people, but it absolutely is the case. The thing that you want to understand is that you want to take advantage of this principle of compounded interest over time. That's why that's so powerful. When you start early, the interest that you're gaining seems so minuscule, it seems so little, and this is why a lot of people don't get started because they think, man, I should just be paying off all my loans and then I should start investing. That's not the case. You want to start investing even a little bit now so that you can, number one, gain the habit, and number two, so that you can start tapping into compounded interest. Because the dollars that are in your billfold today end up becoming tens of thousands of dollars for your 40, 50, or 60-year-old self down the line. So anyway, the specific math I'd be happy to work out with you on your own financial plan to show you, but I promise you this is the case. So if you're 21 years old, start investing right now. Do not wait until you're 24 or 25 or whatever the case is, because those 3 years that you're missing out on end up costing you tens of thousands of dollars, perhaps even hundreds of thousands of dollars. By the time you're in your retirement age. So you need to get started right now. So that's the first thing. Second thing you need to understand is you've got to allocate a sacred portion of every amount that you earn into what we're going to call your freedom fund. Okay, so think about all the money that you earn and then think of that like a piece of pie. And Uncle Sam gets their big piece. That's taken out. Now you've got what you keep. Out of what you keep, you want to divide that into two buckets. So the one bucket is going to go to all your monthly expenses, your cost of living. And by the way, if you don't know what that amount of money is, that's a big problem. You need to figure that out. So you're going to map out, what's your rent, what's your gas, what's your food, how much do you spend on clothing, what's your spending money, how much does it cost you to sustain your current lifestyle? You want to have that number figured out. And then you want to figure out where is the wiggle room. And ideally, you want to shoot for allocating a minimum of 10% of every dollar that you earn into your freedom fund. Okay? Now, by the way, you might be thinking, Ty, there's no way I can take 10% out of the money that I currently earn. Well, the truth is the savings are there somewhere. You just need to find them. You need to be creative. So, think of it this way. If the government came to your door and said, hey, another 10% tax hike, you'd yell, you'd kick, you'd scream, and then you'd figure out a way to pay it, right? So make it an absolute must, and understand that every day you do not invest, you are cheating your 50-year-old self out of serious cash, and that you're going to regret it eventually. So ideally 10%. I personally save 25% of every dollar that I make, put it in my freedom fund, okay? But you want to get that. And by the way, maybe you can only do 5% or whatever. But another big trick that you can use is allocate 5%, get on that regimen, and then whatever your next raise in pay is, allocate that to your freedom fund. That's a really easy way to make sure that you're setting up yourself in the right direction. But you want to make sure you develop that habit of putting away that money in the freedom fund. And by the way, you just set this up direct deposit, right? So you've got your money coming in every week or every 2 weeks. Have your 75% go here, 25% go here. The reason for that is so it's automatic. You do not want to have to go into your bank account and manually remove money and put it somewhere else, because then you're going to be tempted to say, oh, well, I'll do it next time. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure you set it up automatically. That way you only see this amount of money that you can use for the month. The rest is sacred. It's untouched, and it's going and it's making money for you, like a cash machine in your sleep. So you want to set that up immediately. Now inside your freedom fund, think of your freedom fund as having 2 basic buckets, okay? And this is where you want to put your psychology is. First, you want to have your security bucket, okay? So this is safe investments. And then you want to have a risk/growth bucket. And this is investments where you understand it's a little bit riskier, but the return might be a little bit higher. Now, what your level of comfortable risk is, you've got to make up for yourself. I can't make that up for you. But I can tell you the general rule of thumb is if you're younger, you can probably handle more risk. You've got more time to make up any losses. If you're older and you need to cash in on this money, you want to be a little bit more conservative with your investments, okay, as a general rule. But for instance, now the question, the golden question comes up. Well, where do I put my money? Okay, I'm allocating 10 to 25%. Where do I put my money? Well, you want to get started in those index funds I mentioned to you. And in this book, I can't remember if it's in Unshakable or Money Master the Game, but Tony actually outlines what he calls the all seasons portfolio, which he identified from the legendary investor Ray Dalio. The all seasons portfolio is a portfolio, a specific diversification of investments that literally only lost money, I think, 2 years out of the past 40 years in the market economy, which is just unheard of. And on average, I think it averaged something like a 7 to 9% return every single year. And that's a specific allocation of specific investments. So again, that's beyond our little conversation here, where you want to invest. But the basics of what you want to get started with today, as in like right after this video, don't put it off, is set up direct deposit into 2 separate accounts. Map out your monthly expenses, put a sacred percentage of your money going into your freedom fund. And then you want to set up some sort of retirement system, either a 401k or an IRA. Look for one with virtually no fees. And you want to then have automatic withdrawals being invested from that account that you've got your direct deposit going into. And then finally, in terms of your specific allocation, your specific diversification, because you don't want to put all your money in one basket. Let's have a follow-up conversation on that, or do your due diligence. Tony's got these 2 books. You can also check out Ray Dalio's got a new book out called Principles that I am looking forward to reading as well. But again, if you're looking forward to taking your financial freedom into your own hands and not just getting by, living paycheck to paycheck, or kind of doing okay with your finances, but if you really want to master this area, then let's have a conversation. And if it's not with me, that's totally fine. But this is an area of your life that you have got to get handled immediately. So I hope this has inspired you to take some action. And giving you a little bit of an introduction. It's not as hard as you think, but you got to get started right now, like right now, if you've not gotten started. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this book review. Again, the book is Unshakable by Tony Robbins. Check it out, or reach out to me if you want to take your financial freedom to the next level. Thanks for listening.